All right. So hello, everyone. I just finished the second Sunday talk I've done now and realized that I did not click record for the entire talk. We did like 3 hours. And so I wanted to make something, see how brief it is, at least to have for those who attended to go back and look at, or for those who are interested in what we ended up talking about as a review for that. Because what the intention for the class was today, as an extension of last time, where we talked about the 8 extraordinary vessels and their evolution, their development. Today we were going to be getting into the primary channel sequence and its order and how that all unfolds and plays out. But in preparation for that, we had a question from Nick Zeke, one of our first-year students, and it was a very provocative question, a question that I've heard Jeffrey ask and challenge the audience a number of times before, which is why are the lungs the start of the primary channel sequence? And so this was Nick's question. It's most common to see discussion on the channel system start with the lungs, and the explanation is that we take a breath when we are born. Is this the only reason we start with the lungs? And are there any other orders to discuss the channel system? Perhaps starting with the kidneys, as they house Jing and water, being a necessity for life. So that was the question we started with about 3 hours ago. And in my response, I pointed out that yes, there are at least a few other reasons. Is this, saying, is this the only reason, the breath at the start of life, that we start with the lungs? And so to get into that, rather than jumping right in with the lung and the primary channel sequence and what the lung's functions are and what the lung is doing and challenging us to do, go on, Makai, go kitty. We took a step back to look at more a Chinese model for conception and gestation, especially more from a 5-element point of view, because at least to some extent you could take what I said last week about the 8 extras and think about their development from an embryological point of view. And that's where we started today, in making a comparison too with a system Jeffrey was mentioning of conception, gestation, that was suggesting the 8 extras start with Ren and Du, that it's the coming together of the mother's yin and the father's yang, but then you have a third force being the Chang as an intermediary between yin and yang. And last week, so I'm going to try bringing up now, like I did earlier, a share screen with my Microsoft Paint application, so that I can do a few little drawings and you all can follow along my thought process there. So I'm erasing that page, don't worry about that. Excuse me. And then looking at this idea of Ren, Du, and Chang, yin, yang, and the mediating force between them, how does that develop? And last week I even went ahead and mentioned this idea. I've read in some modern books, of course, that there's the egg, and that when the sperm, the yang aspect comes and hits the egg, that point of penetration, like we say for Chang, the penetrating vessel, Changma, that's what that means, the thrusting vessel, that which is right in the middle is the implication, as a homophone sounds similar to the word zhang, which means middle, means central, and also dong means ancestral. So they know some component is coming from your ancestry, but also some component is a spiritual force. And the sperm, this red line here, would be the father's sperm coming and hitting the zygote of the egg, the mother's egg. And at that point would potentially become the Du20 right there. where it hits, and then directly across from it is going to become the Ren 1, the gathering of yin, from heaven, from Bai Hui, this would be right, the first cellular division taking place would be then the Chong. And so, this idea of this level of intimacy taking place, of development, and how then from, the fertilization of the egg, you have a central line division taking place. And now what's in front of that line, the middle division, is going to be the yin aspect, or the yin already descended as it came in, because that's how Jeffrey will usually describe it, that the yin descends first. When the universe first was created from Wuji, came Tai, everything was one as an egg, and then you had a yin factor sink in and down. And so then you have yin, and that's why we normally think of Chong, Ren, Du as being the sequence of maturation and development of the 8 extraordinary vessels. That the Chong, you have the central division, you have the yin that sinks from that, you have the yang then rises, creating the Dumai, and then the yin further cycles and sinks back down as the Renmai, Ren and Du. And then again, as that plays out postnatally, from the first Ren, the bonding taking place, ventral to ventral contact, and then the Du, individuality individuating as the spine activates, as the head becomes more mobile, start to look around, the limbs becoming mobile, eventually to the legs becoming mobile with the full activation or fuller, you don't fully activate Dumai, the 8 extras, until you've gone through puberty, really, at least, or until you become enlightened, maybe. You don't have the full activation of the 8 extras, but you have, the fuller activation of Dumai as you begin to take on more individuation walking. You can propel yourself now through your environment. It's no longer just where mommy or daddy puts you or holds you, but I can become my own thing. Dumai is more fully manifesting there. So there is this conception model that's relative to the 8 extraordinary vessels, and I talked more about that last time, how then the Yin Wei Mai is developing as we're trying to be building the blood from our experiences, even in utero, as we're building blood from our mother's blood and Yin Qi and Yuan Qi and everything she's putting into us, that's going to be influencing how our flesh, how our physicality, how our earth suit, as my mom and I sometimes call them, is going to take shape and is going to take form. So this idea of the embryo in Chinese would be called the Pei, P-E-I, is the first form we take in life, the embryo, and then we develop the membranes, the Gao, and then by the 3rd trimester, we've become, for sure by that point, the fetus. So even within Chinese thinking of gestation, there are different stages we go through, and they have different names for those. The being an embryo is not quite the same as the membrane stage, not quite the same as the fetal stage. And as I recall, that's going through the 3 trimester model those relate to. And so that is where we went into next. In a class a few years ago in 2017, Jeffrey taught a conception and pregnancy class here in Asheville at the college. And so I was, very fortunate to attend that and take some great notes and remember a lot. And that's something I'll bring up often in clinic with people, is this cycle that he was saying takes place in conception and gestation. That is not one we typically learn about. I didn't learn about it in our TCM books or in our TCM classes at school. And so this is working, and I'm going to erase this now, this dividing cell here that we all once were. and look at first, because historically, timeline-wise, he said that there was a model put forth by Chow Yuan Feng, who was a practitioner just prior leading up to the beginning of the Tang Dynasty, who had a big impact, Jeffrey says, on Sun Simiao's writings and practice. And Chow Yuan Feng, I can't remember for sure, might have been an imperial physician himself. But in any case, he had a medical book that he wrote. I don't remember the name, and I've never read it. But Jeffrey's taught some about it and about him, and that he was a Chinese medical clinician, but his book was all a book of prescriptions giving Qigong exercises. But that from that book, Sun Simiao had a lot of influences also in some of like his diagnostic and thought processes. But then Sun Simiao giving more acupuncture and herbs, as we all might know. But that Chow Yuan Feng also put forth, I guess in his book, also this idea of how the baby's organs and channels are developing through the 9 to 10 months of gestation that Jeffrey was saying was potentially more common in more ancient agrarian societies. Jeffrey was suggesting that it wasn't that uncommon for a pregnancy to go for 10 months in an maybe less, I don't want to say developed or nurturing environment, but in an environment where there maybe wasn't as many resources around. Food maybe was a little more scarce. There was more cold and environmental factors to be dealing with. That it wasn't that uncommon, I guess, he was saying, for gestation to go 10 full months. And so then he said Chow Yuan Feng, similar to the celestial stems, the 10 celestial stems of Chinese astronomy and astrology, that also begins with wood. And Chow Yuan Feng, in his gestational model, put forth that the development of our channel system begins not with metal, like the primary channels postnatally sequence, how we sequence them, but prenatally begin with the development of wood, and with wood yin, with liver. So I could write out the sequence here. I'm just going to do black and white. I'm not going to change color for every, but it's liver, gallbladder, and then pericardium, triple heater, and then spleen and stomach, and then lung, large intestine, and then of course kidney and bladder. And so this is a sequence going, like this. That makes sense. Oops, my pen. Meaning, I could have written it like this: liver, gallbladder, pericardium, triple heater, spleen, stomach, lung, large intestine, kidney, bladder. So that is Chow Yuan Feng. As I recall, this is how you spell his name, Chow Yuan Feng. And his sequence of development for the organs and channels within the baby during gestation, and that this was on a monthly basis, month 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., 7, 8, 9, 10. And Jeffrey was saying how, well, this even gives a good idea, good credence then. We use bladder 67 all the time to help promote labor and delivery. So right here, when that would be coming through and trying to move now this energy of the water element, it's been held in the lower abdomen, and get that now to move and to release the water. So bladder 67. And that through each month of gestation, main thing to be mindful of is that you would not want to needle And I was saying this morning, I don't remember specifically if he said or not, Pt2, but at least don't needle the given organ/channel during that month of gestation, because it's going to disrupt potentially that process of development for the child. So month 1, don't needle. If you want to be really cautious, don't moxa the liver. Month 2, gallbladder. Month 3, pericardium. Month 4, triple heater, etc. So word of warning there, if you're, want to be really responsible clinician, whatever, and you're worried that something will go wrong if you do needle at the wrong time, then you wouldn't do points on those channels during those months. But here now, right at the end, you're ready for delivery. The water has already broken. Bladder 67, fine, bring it on. So that's this Chow Yuan Fang model of gestation through the 9 to 10 months of pregnancy. So this obviously is not following our primary channel sequence, but this, maybe you've noticed or not, is following like a lot of people might think. Why doesn't it start with wood is the first channel in the primary channel sequence? And why doesn't that primary channel sequence follow the generating cycle, the creation cycle for life, right? Wood, fire, earth, metal, water, which is, of course, here what we have taking place: wood, fire, earth, metal. Sorry, I've been talking for like 3.5 hours now because this is right off of this morning. Metal and water. So here within his model, you have these taking place: the first 2 months, the second 2 months, middle 2 months, and then the final 4-month split. Wood, fire, earth, metal, water. Creation cycle, right? So it is there. It's just kind of hidden. It's in there in the process of us developing, of us gestating within the womb. You have the generating cycle also taking place in terms of this Chow Yuan Fang sequence of channels and organs development. And I wasn't really planning to go there this morning, and I didn't look back through my notes and Jeffrey through all of this. So, I could start to just make stuff up about why this sequence might be the way it is from what I know about these organs and their channels and relationships. But I would think I could do more of that in the future, dissecting this sequence in particular, and look back through my notes from him more too before I do that. The other model that he brought in during that lecture of conception and gestation involved not the generating cycle, but what's called the xie cycle, meaning the weakening phase, or I was calling it the depleting phase. And so this, I'll get my cursor here. In this model, you can just draw them out: water, metal, earth, fire, and wood. We have the generating cycle we were just talking about, Chow Yuan Fang, going clockwise. But when it comes to conception, like some of us might know clinically, the patients come in, and the first thing you might ask a fertility patient who's come to see you, have you been to see any Western medicine fertility doctors? And what have they told you? And like I was saying to them this morning, that very often those who are coming to see us to help with fertility are coming because they've already been to their Western medicine person. Now here we are, as coming to be their last resort, maybe, or maybe not last resort yet. They haven't gone to the priest yet or something. They're still at a medical office. And the Western med fertility tests, they all check out, they tell you. Very often the case of people seeking Chinese medicine care for fertility. The Jing is all there, right? The essence is intact. The mom has eggs, they look good. The dad has sperm, it looks good. The water element down here on our drawing is there. Check. But now from a more spiritual perspective, sorry, I just zoomed my screen in by mistake, where we know, I can make this bigger even, okay. From a spiritual perspective, the Jing is there, but like we know from a Chinese medicine perspective, you know, life isn't just Jing, it's Jing, Qi, and Shen. And so is the spirit there. And the main component that you're looking for, at least initially, is the mom's, the couple's ability to have a capturing, if you will, of the spirit. Can you attract the spirit into the essence? And can you get it to start to take up a residency there? And in that process, I'm trying to find my cursor here, of doing that, the first thing that you kind of need to start attracting, or one of the main things to get that physical implantation to take place, is the physical soul, the corporeal soul. You need that seed that is itself, it's spiritual energy. We're all made of spiritual energy. That's the Po. The Po is corporeal. The corpse is still sacred, even the corpse. You should treat with reverence. The temple, the building blocks of the temple itself is sacred. Not just the Holy Spirit within, not just the priest within, not just the community that gathers, the communion that takes place within the temple, but the walls itself, your flesh, your physicality, your shape, your form, your membrane is sacred. And that's the Po, that your design is something sacred and that it holds a very specific purpose that is, well, and that purpose is you. For you to be able to have the shape that you take. I said last time, I think of, in some ways, right, the Po, get my drawing here. We talk about our blueprint. You know, we use that term quite a bit in Chinese medicine. The Chong Mai is our blueprint. The kidneys hold our blueprint. You might hear that. Jeffrey say that, or different books say that. I don't know how I can get this to do what I want. Go like that, and then go like that. What I'm trying to do is just create a, am I really this, no outline? I did solid color, give me a break. In any case, you have the blueprint, right? I'll just draw a little one. And then what is the actual shape that's gonna take place? You know, when you're building a house or a building or whatever it is, a product design, whatever it is, you have that blue piece of paper, but then the question is, what are you actually drawing on it? And so we even do, you know, I can't get it to seem to work for whatever reason, but you know, the writing on the blueprint is white. White is metal, white is the Po. That's the specificity. Point it out, be really specific, draw it out of just what shape I'm going to trace my own head I'm going to want to have for this incarnation. And so that was a context of Chinese thought, Taoist thought, that we had a say in our shape, in our ethnicity, in our physicality, in what we're taking on for our essence that we're going to get loaded into. And so that takes place then at the time of conception. Give a fresh page here because that was whole bunch of nonsense that you have the patient comes in and the Jing is there. The water, the black, the dark blue is there. But is the Po able to descend? Are the lungs descending into the kidneys? And are they taking on the Po of a baby? You can have up to 7 Po that come and get all wrapped up into one body. And depending on what the temperamental dispositions of each of those Po, then that's someone who has a little, who has, so 7 parts. Your 2 parts metal, your 2 parts fire, and your 1 part wood, your 1 part earth, and you only got 6. That's it. You didn't even get a 7th Po. And you've got, these different parts, these different makeups of our elemental temperament. Like Jeffrey says, it's extremely rare that you have a person that's just really a, all one element type of person. That's going to start to be where you start to get more into probably the sort of idiopathies, personality, what we might start to call disorders in modern, psychology, where you have a type of a temperamental nature that's going to such an extreme that it seems like the person has no balance through any of the other elements. And I mean, it might not always be a bad thing either. Like just recently, I heard of a syndrome called Williams syndrome, and I think some people call it the happiness syndrome. Like this individual who's being interviewed, a young woman who was just like so happy all the time, so open heart. Her parents had to tell her when she was little that she could not just run up to every stranger and give them a hug. And to my mind, that's just someone who's just like an extreme fire type of person. They always have a smile on their face. They always have a hug for whoever it is. No judgment. It's all been melted away by all that fire, except, the parents coming there, telling them and socializing them and whatever. So that's where you might start to see some of these elemental tendencies going to extremes. Someone who's just a wood person, who's just a metal person type of thing. It's not usually the case. Most of us have some just variation of all of these, and that's influenced by our astrology. You might be aware of the 8 pillars of the stems and branches. We could do more on that in the future. We each have multiple elements coming from our birth chart, and then also from our parents' dispositions and their own socializations, and then the socializations of our environment having elemental impacts on who we are and our characteristics of our personalities. But in the process of this all beginning, first question, is the Jing there? Yes, the fertility test all check out. Okay, so we need to get the Po to be coming in. So this is where Jeffrey says he thinks a lot of times in modern Chinese medicine is being neglected, the lungs component, the metal element component, to be getting the Po to descend into the water, into the Jing, into the essence. And that in some ways starting this cycle then of once the Po is there, then it needs to take up a greater residency into the mother's system, into the mother's earth, into her body. And so then that becomes the first trimester of pregnancy and gestation, represented by the earth element. As we all know, many of us know, it can be quite the challenge to the mother's digestion during that time period. And then from that time going to the second trimester, the fire element, as these components of water, metal, and earth are becoming further wrapped up into each other, and you start to have the creation of the pericardium, the individual identity and and enwrapping, embodying, dare I say, entombment of the soul, of the spirit into the body. The creation of the pericardium, the individual taking residence, and like I was saying, in the Chinese context, giving their sign off on this as being okay. This idea of a celestial heavenly mandate, the Tianming, that we all knew who we were choosing as parents for their ethnicity, for their geography, for their society, for their temperamental disposition to interact with what we're looking for to get out of life. And the first trimester especially is really like a testing period, Jeffrey says, in the context of Chinese culture and Taoism, that they think the first trimester is like a getting to know you. I said earlier, like an eavesdropping. The baby's in there, the soul's, spiraling around, listening to mom and dad, who in those first few weeks really might not even know that there's, someone thinking about them as their parents potentially. And so this is the context then, Jeffrey will say, well, that soul maybe just wanted to incarnate for a very brief period of time to feel then, as the mother and father become aware of that pregnancy, to feel, you might think or hope, like a sense of unconditional love coming from the parents to you as their expectant child. Or maybe they feel a lot of fear about maybe the child's going to be, deformed or something, or, born with a retardation or something. But maybe they still feel, then they're questioning, am I going to be able to love this child anyway? Yes or no? And so maybe the child just wants to feel for a short period of time, for one more incarnation, a sense of, Jeffrey will say, unconditional love. That do my mom and dad accept me, and would they, are they embracing me right now? I'm being embraced in the womb for whatever I might be. But then once I'm born and those expectations start being put on me to be a good son or daughter, to to listen to them when they tell me to do things, or am I going to start to give that feedback? No, mom, no, dad, I don't want to do what you say. But then is that going to challenge their unconditional love of me? And I'm going to have to start going through trials and tribulations. And so maybe for one given incarnation, that's all that soul wants. One more sense of unconditional love. And Jeffrey says, then that might be a incarnation of a soul for just a few months, just to feel that again. And then the mother has a miscarriage. But that within the first trimester, that they would maybe in some ways just trying to console, the parents that, that baby was just doing a trial phase and it's okay, it's gone, it's moved on now. It, embraced you for a period of time, you embraced it for a period of time, but now like you were going to have to someday anyway, can you let each other go? And if you don't, then you might make, like what Jeffrey will say, like a ghost baby, that you're not willing to let that miscarriage go, or maybe you had an abortion and that baby's not willing to let you go. And so there's a force between the two of you that's still holding on and that's still keeping some degree of residency there, and that maybe is making it difficult for you to get pregnant again. That, there might be a ghost baby obstructing the new reception of life. So that is getting into this cycle of conception and gestation, Jeffrey said, was put forth by a clinician named Chen Ziming in the Song Dynasty. Spell that Chenziming. Looking at this idea of what's called, again, the xiangxie, the weakening or depleting cycle. How water, then you have the water, then you get the po. You have the po, and then that po needs to take residency in the mother's body, in her flesh, in her center. Earth occupies the center. And that's going to begin the process of challenging the mother's earth from her perspective, and also the process of accumulating earth flesh for the baby. And then through that, the first trimester, the ripening and the rottening of food and drink to assimilate, to transform that into now not only yourself as a woman, but into a child as your baby that you're creating. You're having to supply them, their earth, with your earth from whatever food and everything that you're taking in too. And as that's taking place, then by the third or by the second trimester, you start having the pericardium, the spirit is like, this is when it's saying, all right, now this is getting serious, kind of, mom, dad, I choose you type of thing. You know, this was a trial phase, but now this is me, my fire really coming into it. and really starting to now take on more of that self, that sense, the beginnings, the buddings of a identity for oneself within that. So especially the pericardium being activated here in some way. And then from the second trimester, I still need to hold on for a while longer. You still need more energy coming into you, getting stored into you, the blood, liver storing blood. And that you need to continue this process of like a germinating, like a plant, like a seed that's coming to a full cycle of germination. And that like the menstrual cycle, which also follows this cycle, that then as you come around to liver, which has its job of holding, that then eventually that needs to release. And then you have the release, and then of course you have the water breaks, right? So trimester 1, 2, 3, water breaks, and then you have deliverance or delivery, labor, the metal element, releasing out, the mother releasing out. And so, right, you even have bladder 67 as a metal point, right? Yeah. The releasing out, and then like Nicholas was saying, the reception of breath for the baby. So we've kind of gone full cycle here, if you're following. The Jing is there, the fertility is there, but are you attracting the Po for a baby? Are you attracting a soul that feels that you would help it to achieve the lesson plans, the lessons that it intends for itself to live out in this life with this particular shape and form and incarnation? And if so, then you get that Po, you start adding more physicality onto it, more flesh from postnatal sustenance coming in from the mom. As that you're starting to build up your flesh is getting more and more, developing more and more membranes and wrappings, and then the pericardium, the heart, the flesh of the heart itself. I went on quite a bit this morning about how, of course, the heart itself does not have a flesh radical, the radical for the moon next to it, that the heart itself is something immaterial, but we have this, the pericardium, the Shin Bao, the heart wrapper, taking place, where I think the character for that, the wrapper, is like this, or it's something like this. The word Bao, and then Shin is the word for the heart, right? Something like that. And the heart itself is something immaterial. My own thoughts, you might be able to argue that it's the actual electrical impulse taking place in the heart, or potentially even the empty space that the impulse is taking place across, the synaptic cleft, if you will, could be the heart itself. Nothing about the flesh and blood is the heart itself. That's the pericardium, that's the heart wrapper. That's the physicality that is taking a component from earth that creates flesh, that creates muscle, to start to wrap up the spirit, the Shin and the Shen. And that metal is helping in that process too, where metal is helping us to define boundaries of things. And so in that process then here in the second trimester, you have the pericardium, the ego I suggested this morning, the little Shen, the Ling Shen, all different words I used for it, taking on this mandate and saying, all right, here we go now. I'm all in type of thing. I'm gonna do my best from this point on as the context to not miscarriage. If I was gonna do that, then I would have probably done that earlier on in the first trimester. And that's kind of a spiritual component brought in from Taoism into Chinese medicine, to some extent at least. And that once I decide I'm gonna hold on to this life, I'm gonna hold on full term as much I can, then I need to have the storage of more qi and blood to do that. And so liver helps to do that until you have liver releases and you get back around to water breaks, and then the first breath begins. So that is this Chen Ziming conception and gestation model. And I went on to say how, I think I mentioned how this is also the, if I can control Z enough to get kind of a blank slate again, how this is also the cycle for gynecology, for the monthly menstrual cycle. That it starts in some way with, I'll get it, just whatever color here, with the earth element, the blood cycle, beginning with stomach. Stomach, especially in the older days, had the context of building the blood. And then the stomach sent that beginnings of blood up to the heart to get the finalization of blood in the heart. That heart circulates the blood. I didn't do this morning, but heart, moves up and out every way, circulates the blood to the four limbs to have the experiences that we came here for. I had an appetite for life. My valley spirit drew me in. And now I have these experiences that I want to live out. But just the menstrual cycle, you're building the blood, you have experiences, circulate the blood, and then how much of that do you have in excess that you can store back to make liver blood? Even body fat in Chinese medicine had the context of being liver blood, especially belly fat had that context. How much can you be storing that liver blood back, that resource that then you could be using to conceive and have at the beginnings of the gestation of a new life? And so you don't get pregnant, then you have a release at the end of the month takes place. That's where we talk to some extent about lungs needing to help descend to get a release. Kidneys have to say, okay, release. Kidneys govern the two lower orifices. And so you have a release at the end of the menstrual cycle, or you have a conception. What did I do? At the end of the menstrual cycle. So now these liver resources, liver blood, liver yin, is going to get held and is going to go into trying to nourish now the Jing, the essence of the fetus or of the embryo as it's starting out. And so then that, that's creating the fertility. Fertility is there. You have a healthy menstrual cycle. You have enough liver blood, enough liver yin. You're building back your kidney yin to some extent. And the kidney yin is sufficient to take on the Po, to receive the Po of a new life form that's going to start to develop now inside of you. And so now from there, this follows that same cycle I just said as the gestation. Po to earth, first trimester, to fire, second trimester, to wood, third trimester, right, is the same as, in some way, earth beginning of menstrual cycle as far as the building up phase. You need to build, after the period ends, or your early childhood, you're building up, and then menarche occurs. So menarche really occurring, of course, that we call tiangui. So that's when the water comes from heaven too. So that also has this water and earth component, or metal component, that the heavenly energy, the 10th stem of the celestial branches, is occurring now around maybe the 10th year of life at the earliest, you might hope or expect for a female to reach menarche. If not, by the second cycle of 7 and 8, 14 years. But you're going to have the tiangui taking place, the ability to have fertility taking place, the beginning of the menstrual cycle. We can even talk about that this morning. And then from there, the menstrual cycle came, and then it ended. And then you have to start building blood now for the next month. The earth, building the blood, circulate for what you need. Whatever's left over gets stored to liver. Do you conceive? No. You have menstruation. Cycle starts again. Do you conceive? Yes. The essence is building. The essence receives the Po. And now the Po is getting entombed into the earth of the mother's body, where it's going to start to accumulate its own earth and flesh for gestation, development. And as it does so, as it becomes more and more substantial, the pericardium, the identity, the little soul, the little Shen, is taking on its residency with its volition, we would say. And it's starting to get a better sense of all those things from digestion that it's assimilating from mom, from dad, into what it is. So it's giving its red seal of approval in the second trimester. And then it needs a little bit longer to keep gestating, for liver to keep on holding the blood for mom, liver to keep on just keeping that chi, not too free and easy at this point. You don't want things leaking out, wandering. You want things to be constrained. So liver has that ability too, to keep things constrained and to store the blood. So liver can store blood, yin, and constrain chi, yang. It's keeping things together here as we're approaching, birth, deliverance, as I said. As Jeffrey will say too, I think, I've heard him say. And so then you have the water breaks, and then that first breath comes. So this idea of the xiang, xing, xie, the weakening or depleting. Yeah, depleting cycles, the reverse generating cycle, the reverse sheng cycle idea. Okay. Again, during menstruation, also during conception, gestation taking place. And it's this idea I was suggesting before, because like they're saying, why not the generating cycle? Why isn't this following, okay, I'm saying metals going into, water. I could probably construe this. Why doesn't Po go into water? And then why doesn't, Chow Yuan Fang said liver gallbladder for first trimester or first 2 months. So why not wood? And then fire, and then earth, and then metal is back around to where you have delivery again. So I'm not making up my own, theory right now. Maybe I could, but if you're wondering why not sheng cycle, then that'll have to be your own exploration, or maybe I could make that up for you. But why are they saying xiang xie cycle, the depleting, the weakening cycle? Xiang means like a cycle, right? So xiang sheng, xiang ke for the ke cycle, xiang cheng for the overacting cycle, and xiang wu for the counteracting, or we might say insulting cycle. And so as we go through this cycle twice, you know, not even once, but twice, through menstruation and then through conception and gestation, now here we are, the water has broken, delivery is coming, the mysterious path is opening between water and metal, you know, life and death, and the first breath is emerging there, you know, metal. Or maybe it's not, and they got to slap you on the butt, like I said, and get you to start breathing, get you to start crying. So metal energetics taking place with the first breath as the Po now that is in some way stored in the lungs or held by the lungs. That is getting its first breath of postnatal air to say we now have postnatal activation. Here we are for our lesson to start taking place. Now, as that's taking place, Po is stimulated, and we all know lungs want to descend into the kidneys, into the water. So you have that first breath out of the womb, they slap you on the butt or whatever, and that lung qi descends down to the kidneys. The Po descends to the jur, down to the will, or what Jeffrey sometimes translates as the motivation, our will to live. Our three major areas of life we get motivated in or by. Jeffrey says most motivations you think you have in life can get subcategorized into three major motivations, being survival, and then call either interaction or intimacy, and then power or differentiation. So the three motivations of the will, survival. I have the will, the motivation to survive, or do you? I have the will or motivation to have interaction or intimacy. And then I have the will or motivation to differentiate. Okay. Or have power. My pen is giving out. And so these would be the three major motivations of the kidneys. And as the lungs are coming down, you might think, you know, and the primary channel sequence, right, is thought to follow these. Lung to spleen, interaction and intimacy being heart up through at least, you know, kidney, and then power differentiation, the pericardium to, you know, triple heater, liver, triple heater, gallbladder, liver. That these three motivations largely stimulate or motivate these various channels. That, you know, first we need to survive, and then we can start to become interactive, more intimate with various aspects, people in life. And then amongst those things I want to interact with are there things I would rather not interact with, differentiate from, or take a power or a control over. So that then is looking at, I'm gonna, how far back? I can only go so far back. I'm just gonna click a new sheet and do even a new drawing. That then becomes now, after gestation, after birth, you have the breath. And then you have the breath descending into the kidneys, the Po descending to the jur, and then the jur having the motivation for life and for survival, to keep on breathing, right? That the kidneys now are continuing to grasp for the lung qi. and the lungs are continuing to descend. This basic axis of survival taking place. And then amidst that survival, how much awakening does there seem to be of this new life form? Is it just a mass of flesh that's breathing and doesn't seem that active? Or does it seem to be activating and awakening? Is there some type of spirit or soul that seems to be emerging now from this lump of flesh, this yin ball that I gestated for 9 or 10 months? And as you do that, and I crowdsourced from the class this morning, and Selena answered for me, because I didn't know how long does it take for the baby's eyes to start opening after they're born. And she said it's going to really vary, and that some of them are, might be within the first few hours, the first hour even, the first day, or some might take a little bit longer. So potentially they're testament to how quickly is our wood element opening up its portal coming up through the eyes, and even never mind the fontanelle being so wide open at that point, due 20 that wood liver connects to. How the breath descends, the will to live is there, the eyes start to open, you start to see that twinkle in the eyes, the spirit coming out as you make eye contact with your baby for the very first time. And then not too long until baby gets hungry, right? And then there you have the reunion or union to stomach channel, forbidden point, stomach 18. So how this could be looking at and I really am just making this up. Jeffrey didn't do this. They're born, the Po into the the lungs, into the kidneys stimulating. Now I have the will to live. I have the will to grow like a tree now taking place, to start opening my eyes, opening my sensation to the environment that I'm now in. First day on earth. And is this going to be the environment that is going to be nourishing and allow my essence to live and to manifest out, for my water to play out, and for me to grow into the tree that I want to become, back towards the sun, towards the fire that we're all, the heaven that we're all reaching for in some way. And so as the eyes opening through liver, the energetics of the spirit, the Shen coming out, see the twinkle in your baby's eye, and then baby gets hungry and needs to come in and start to breastfeed, right? You would hope or expect maybe. And then you start to have that bonding, more taking place. They took me out, I wasn't crying, so they slapped me. Maybe that puts me more into the survival mode. Maybe I came out, maybe I was already breathing, I wasn't even crying. And maybe, they just wiped off the blood and my eyes opened pretty quick. Mom's embracing me, eye to eye contact within the first, why not, 20 minutes. And that intimacy is already much more involved taking place. Or do I feel like, wow, they slapped me already? I need to be surviving. So how even just those first few moments of life might be influencing our evolution and development and be part of our curriculum, right? That we knew to some extent what we were getting ourselves into. That the Hun, the ethereal soul, is kind of like overseeing all of this from a perspective that transcends time, right? But we're still here playing it out anyway. So you have the suckling taking place, and then we know that's the first nourishment, the first Gucci from the postnatal environment coming in through the stomach channel, now into your central receptacle, your stomach, your Ren 12, and then that, of course, becoming the origin for the postnatal primary channels. Lungs beginning at Ren 12, at an earth point, a central receptacle of where our spirit wanted to come into this valley of a body, this earth of a life, to have a certain type of nourishment, certain type of experiences we wanted to consume and digest and assimilate, or maybe poop out, let it go. We have to do that eventually anyway. And as I'm doing that now, what are the parts that are nourishing me? And what are the parts that I'm going to excrete out? Lungs and large intestine. From the center that could be receiving all things, what is it exactly that you want to start to emphasize and to start to highlight in your life? And so that's in some way where lungs, large intestines start to come in. As from a postnatal environment, you have to start to navigate what, again, is applying to me. And to help you do that, what do I judge as being good for me, or even at least acceptable, or what do I reject? So metal element, reception, rejection. Is the baby very colicky? Are they constantly throwing up? You know, they have a little milk and then they throw it up. Or they're just starting to eat solid foods and then it's all gurgling back up. Does it seem in some way that that earth element, which already is very accepting by nature, it wants to accommodate all the other elements? Is their earth receptive? Are their lungs receptive? Are they having an easy time breathing, receiving breath, receiving life? Are they having an easy time letting go of things? Or does it seem like, you know, whatever we put in them, they just regurgitate it, or 5 minutes and it's pooping, they're pooping it out? Could they even be really digesting this food if they're constantly pooping whatever I, you know, put into them, or they're constantly throwing it up? So this question here, first day of your life on earth, you're starting to receive, and how receptive are you? How yin are you right off the bat? So you can ask your mom, your grandma, people who were around maybe, you know, what was I like as an infant? Because our spleen's pretty weak at this point. Spleen blood banking, you know, spleen banking the blood is short-term memory. Right now that many of us had a strong enough spleen to bank that blood that then got circulated to then store that in liver for long-term memory, right? It's just, we didn't have strong enough spleen and blood at that point to be remembering that far back. Or maybe some of us do, or maybe it's in there somewhere with, you know, hypnotism and all that. But you can ask your parents, you know, what was I like, for hints to your early temperament? How receptive was I to what they were putting in me? Was it a formula? Was it mom's milk, etc.? Or to the first things I started eating? You know, they eat rice, so they tried me on rice. They eat pasta, so they tried me on pasta. They eat millet, so they tried me on millet. Whatever it is, how receptive to it are you? That first question of the primary channels, you know, if it's lung, but lung is starting at earth, Ren 12. So receptivity, how receptive to food and drink are you? Lungs, how receptive to air are you? Kidneys, how receptive in general to life are you? So you have that starting to take place. So that might be a place to wrap it up for here. Really just as a precursor, most of what we did today, getting into really preparing us still for disembarking through the primary channels. Looking at these models for, you know, the menstrual cycle, for conception, gestation, and how that begins the process of the postnatal sequence of the primary, of the Jing Lo channels and collaterals, where, you know, you could definitely take here. So I've made this argument, right, that you get the first breath, stimulates the motivation to keep living, stimulates our sense of wanting to live, grow, achieve, open ourselves up, open the portals to heaven to help us grow back towards heaven. The spirit becoming active, becoming lively as you're becoming more engaged with those around us and with life. And then realizing, okay, had a lot on loan from mom there for 10 months. I need to start getting, well, still more from mom. Thanks, mom. I need to start now my postnatal nourishment though, into earth, then going to breastfeeding. Breastfeeding, ventral to ventral contact, the development of the orbicular muscles, the eyes, the mouth, the nipples, the genitalia, and how you start to have an imparting of information subconsciously, really, from that ventral to ventral, mother to child, even father to child, as you're holding them, gazing to each other's eyes, or the child's breastfeeding, and their renmai, their channel of bonding, is starting this process of taking in, and how we even represent that through the lungs, right? So that first day, how active was your lung 7, your renmai opening point, right? And as you began this process of bonding to your mother or to whoever is there to hold you, right? Should we all be so lucky that, you know, our mother didn't die in childbirth or something like that, and that then who will be there to pick me up and to take care of me, at least for a little while, right? Or am I going to have, of course it's happened, incarnations where it was you and mom died, and somehow she got you out, and then that was it. And it was you in that hut, you know, 15,000 years ago, or, you know, you and mom in that bush, you know, you went out for that day to pick, you thought you had a little longer, and then you had a premature birth. No one went with you that day out, and you were gathering berries, whatever, and it was too much, and you didn't make it, and it was almost that, you know, you're in your 8th month maybe, and baby kind of made it out, but baby didn't make it into your arms, and baby didn't, you know, get anything at all. So how could that still be a life that a soul might take on, just for that experience of whatever it was, without judgment? Yeah, because that's what it is. Metal, getting into it, judgment. That's what it's all going to be starting out with. What's good for me, what's not good for me, what do I accept, what do I reject into life? Is life golden, metal, a precious gift, or is life crap, large intestine, something, you know, is life shit type of attitude? So that's more of what we'll be getting into next week, I guess. I hope this is an adequate summary of what we did today for those who want that, from who were there today, and also those who might be interested in what we really ended up talking about today. These cycles of conception, of gestation, and then how that begins into the postnatal sequence. Because here we go, you get the, you know, the breastfeeding, I'm saying. Maybe I can get rid of these arrows now. Right, you go around that first day cycle, generating cycle. Breastfeeding coming in, and then that gu qi comes up, mixes with the kong qi, the air in the chest of the baby now. You're breathing and suckling and eating, digesting. Lungs taking that on, and now how is that going to go? Lung, large intestine to stomach. Stomach to spleen to heart, to small intestine, to bladder, to kidney, to pericardium, to triple heater, to gallbladder, and liver. And how we now start postnatally. Why is the sequence of the primary channels, you know, at least initially, starting like that sequence of conception and gestation, right? Following here, counterclockwise, the xie cycle, the diminishing cycle. And then you have a back and forth, of course, between fire and water. Maybe as you're trying to negotiate or discover for yourself your sovereignty in life, and then figuring out where to go from there. Am I going to do it again? Or am I going to have a true liberation into something completely new? So that's kind of where we'll stop it there. I think the only thing I didn't talk about more, like I did this morning, was kind of some of the alchemical sort of significance, as I see it, of at least of the generating cycle compared to the reverse generating cycle. So I'll just briefly try to excuse me, encapsulate that for you. This idea within Taoism, at least, and to some extent Chinese medicine, that right, like I said this morning, the Tao Te Ching, chapter 42. From the Tao comes the one, from the one, the two, from the two to three, and how you have an evolution outwards, but that the motion of the Tao, many people say, is in return, is in reversal, reversion, getting back to the origin of things. How can we undo all of this mess that we've made for ourselves through so many countless lives? Excuse me, I'm just burping a little. Through so many lives of reincarnation, how can we start to undo this wheel of reincarnation? Because that's the context. The generating cycle, you all know this, generate life is the generation of death. That as soon as you take that first breath, that in some way is generating that you're also going to have a last breath, that you're going to have a physical earthly death. You know, if you don't think that, then okay, you'll be around as an immortal all the way until, right, the sun gets so big that the whole earth is going to vaporize, right? The scientific models of prediction. So you want to be an earthly immortal, exist, quote, as long as heaven and earth. Okay, you're going to be there that day when our atmosphere completely evaporates and you're exposed to so much cosmic radiation and the whole earth turns into magma again or something like that. And you're going to be still sitting in your cave in your immortal meditation, whatever you're doing when that happens. But if you don't, then that first breath is also the triggering for your last breath. And that's going to take place in some way through this generating cycle, right? That this is the generation cycle of life that we see taking place. That from the darkness, from the water of night, you have the sun, the yang emerging in the morning, like the spring comes to the fruition of summer, like the midday sun, and then that begins to set down to the horizon and down to set again, like autumn or sunset into night would be this idea of how the daily or the seasonal 5 elements cycles that we are now coming into in our postnatal life, and that we in some ways are going to be challenged by, because this same cycle, of course, is the other part of it in some way is the control cycle. That endemic to life is conflict in some way. And that if we ever want to get out of that conflict, get out of that cycle or circle of reincarnation and conflict and generation, because the spirit can keep having infinite incarnations and iterations and experiences that at some point you might start to realize all fall within certain themes, and we call those the 9 palaces. That, you know, at what point then are you getting, you know, kind of tired of that? Or do you want to see what is the next stage beyond? Because that's the other thing I mentioned this morning, we could talk more about sometime, is at least one version of the Taoist overview of levels of reality or dimensions. And that the Tai Su dimension, right, you could think of them maybe as layers to a bubble. Gosh, I can't draw. Maybe I could do it like this. Oh, that makes it blocked out. So I'll have to go big in. That there's 7 layers to reality. Oh gosh. And just the second one, the second from the bottom, is the level of elemental energy. Thermodynamic processes taking place. conception, gestation, maturation, decline, the process of thermodynamics, heat energy evolving and transforming through a system. So much of what we look at in medicine is just the second level of 3 within the 3 yin dimensions. And that then there's the human dimension, and then there's 3 yang dimensions above that. And that maybe at some point we're tired of just thinking about elements and thinking about thermodynamics and how you could be a one life and then you could go to the next life, or you could be a seed here and then you grow as a tree and you create a seed and then you're a seed again, right? That at some point we might be ready to go beyond that, and all these interesting interactions of the elements and all their possibilities that they can manifest, and maybe see what is even possible beyond that, beyond the limitations of the 5 elements. And where we see them manifesting in at least this earthly way that we currently do. And maybe we could even get to a more elemental plane of reality, you know, a fire dimension type of thing, or a world where everything is on fire, a world where a water world reality, a world where it's all metals, you know, whatever. So you do have, and Jeffrey talks about this, that's not just me making this up now, at least it's some of him bringing some of that in, this idea of at what point are we ready to, you know, start to transcend the Tai Su dimension, the second level of reality. And it has its impacts and its influences and its correspondences to each of the other 6 levels. But what degree of mastery, of control do we have over those 5 elements? And like, I remember what chapter of the Ling Shu, but they talk about this idea, how complete do you feel in the 5 elements? How harmonized do you feel in the 5 elements? Do you feel you have the ability to become or to emphasize any particular element within yourself and within your life? Like a shape changer, like a shape shifter. One day you could be a very fire person, the next day you could be a very metal person. And can you be consistent with that? Could you be a very fire person for a week or a month or a year? Could you be a metal person for a week or a month or a year? And are you recognizing that different stages of life have these provocations and possibilities already kind of built into them, so that we're all getting some ability, or we're all being provoked in some way at various points to be metal, to be earth, to be water, fire, wood? And how comfortable, how complete, how capable do we feel of embracing those different qualities or potentials for life, at least a human life? And when in that process, do we feel like we're just getting dragged on, you know, through this cycle? Like, you know, we're just along for the ride and we're just getting dragged on? Or do we have the ability to slow it down a little bit? Or maybe even go in reverse and try to get back to the origin of things? So this becomes a context, like I said this morning, within Taoist internal alchemy, that it's not in any way that you're not trying to do the generating cycle, you're trying to do the reverse cycle, as you might be trying to create for yourself, okay, here we go, a spiritual immortality, a soul that is no longer going to be, a spirit that's no longer going to be subjugated to the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. And that if you want to be able to do that, that in some way, there's going to be a reversion, a reversal taking place, through the 5 elements, where you'll be having metal going, gosh, I don't have the right brush, metal going back to this way. So I said a little bit more about that this morning. And, you know, this idea of could, like that it's simple, right? And that's what it means too. Tai Su means the great simplicity, as I recall. Right? It's pretty simple to see how you need to water that plant to get it to grow. How wood, you burn the plant and it makes fire. How the fire burns and it makes ashes. How earth, you dig into the earth and it seems like, we know heavy metals are made in the sun, whatever, okay. But you dig into the earth and it seems like these heavy metals are getting condensed and coalescing within the earth that's generating them, that they're coming out of. And then you have these metals and you hammer them out, and yeah, it sometimes seems like it can become very flexible, the metal element, that like it could generate a water-like quality through its molten-like quality. But also once you let it cool, you leave metal out overnight and a lot of condensation collects to it. That metal in some way draws water into it, that it generates in some way water to it. The water, you don't know that it's condensation. You go out in the morning and you think that piece of metal is sweating, maybe, that the water is coming out of it. So you have the generating cycle, which to a lot of people, I think would be pretty obvious, is my argument here. How wood generates fire, fire generates earth, earth generates metal, metal generates water, water generates wood, etc. But what might not be so obvious to people is the process of alchemy is one, Jeffrey says, his words, the redemption of spirit from matter. That our essence, our Jing, has some potential encoded within it that we're trying to manifest and to liberate that out, to live that out, to liberate the spirit from matter. When you feel like this liberation process is taking place in life, that you're unfolding your destiny, then that is going to feel like an alchemical life. Someone who seems to just be creating just what it is that they feel they need in life, right? It's pretty alchemical, magical. You have all the money you need, right? People keep just asking you to teach more classes. You have all the relationships you need. People just, keep asking you to be their friend. You have whatever you need, even though it doesn't seem like you're trying that hard for it. So a pretty magical, alchemical seeming life, a life that feels like you are redeeming your purpose for life through your experiences of life. And so as we're doing that, how much can we see that we are constantly creating alchemy potentially for ourselves, that through the generating cycle, that as right, how many of us can see as the fire is burning the wood, as the fire is diminishing the wood, what is being redeemed from the wood? As the water is diminishing the water, as the wood is diminishing the water, right? How is the essence of the water being redeemed through the wood? As it may be, as the water is rusting the metal, or it's gold and it's not rusting, as the water is rusting the metal, what is being redeemed from the metal into the water as those electrolytes dissolve into the water, and it becomes enriched, and then the wood becomes enriched, and then the fire burns that up. Continuing back through, as the earth becomes redeemed from as the metal becomes redeemed from the earth, you're taking all of that precious minerals out of the field. Is that giving a liberation to life and to the earth? As the fire is falling into ash, how is that fire being redeemed now into a new physicality, the minerals are now coming back down into the field, right? A lot of it is the minerals, especially in agrarian society. You have, the soil, you have the minerals, whatever the content is in the soil and the groundwater, and you keep planting those crops, the wood, and it keeps depleting the soils, and you keep harvesting. Unlike a forest where you get all the leaves fall back down, or you get a forest fire, burns it, and all those ash come back down. Keeps this process of generation going, right? The mineral cycle, if you will. But then at what point do you feel like all of that which I've redeemed now from these elements, through their processes, through their burnings up, through their generations of each other, have I through this process yet redeemed my spirit? And in that process, have I weakened this word of this reverse generating cycle, xie, the xie cycle? Have I weakened? Have I depleted? Maybe we should say, have I redeemed the redemption cycle? Have I redeemed the essence of each of the elements in a way that has been transformative and alchemical to me? Or do I need to keep going through this over and over again? Or have I redeemed myself from the incarnations, the cycle of incarnations, redeemed myself from the necessity of having the jinn to keep playing out, keep manifesting these experiences for the Shen to go through in a physical human body, human experience. So that's very much then this process of xie, weakening, lessening, like we talk about with the heart channel, and the cultivation of the spirit really being one of lessening. Can you lessen the amount of things that you want to be getting involved with in life? Or are there, there's always going to be more things that we can go out and get involved with in life. But when is enough enough? How many cycles do you want? You can keep going really forever, at least until, we get stuck by time, until the sun burns out the earth or whatever. You find a new planet. Why not? So that's this idea of xie cycle, the reverse sheng cycle, and how it has its parallels with this idea of huan, from my perspective, and how this is the cycle then, the xie of menstruation, giving oneself over to the creation of another life, and bringing together the two, mom and dad come together to create you, to create the third factor, or to create the one factor, right? Because one creates the two, creates the three. Two, mom and dad come together to create one, process of reversal, or have two come together to create a third. And they just keep adding their own, crap into the mix. And, I say that like by their judgment. They keep giving you more things to get worked up about in life, to be fulfilling their own judgment of what are their deficiencies in life, or their own excesses in life, that now you as the next generation have the opportunity to try to resolve and try to lessen. So that's as far as I'll go with that. Thank you if you've joined me for this. And like I said this morning, the next class then will really be with the intention of launching more into the primary channel. We just made that up. There's no word primary. It's Jinglo. We'll be launching into the Jinglo, the ordinary channels I suggested this morning we should call them, and their sequence. So thank you for joining me for this. And if it provoked any questions, feel free to type those up and send them along, and maybe I can answer those later. All right, so figure out how to close this Zoom chat. And stop screen share and end call. All right, bye everyone.